Good morning, and thank you for participating in our workshop today, tackling the tricky topics, what you say, and how you say it. My name is Raymond Sege, and I'm Vice President of IT and e-learning at Graybridge Malkam. Graybridge Malkam is proud to have two expert facilitators to help us navigate this topic today. They're standing behind me, and I'll get out of the way in a second. Kay Roberts is a 20-year police veteran and founder of Awakening Wave Organizational Evolution. Kay brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, and energy to her speaking engagements. She is a frequent speaker at conferences on topics concerning respectful human interactions and stress reduction in the workplace. Kay is a certified code model, coach, and a co-author of Sekhmet Rising, The Restlessness of Women's Genius. She also writes a quarterly column for Canadian Security Magazine regarding interpersonal safety and wellness in the workplace. Kay is passionate about our individual and collective ability to create respectful, safe, and diversity-competent workplaces. Dr. Prince Ehoro is our Senior Analyst of Diversity and Inclusion at Graybridge Malkam. Prince is a native of Nigeria, an accomplished facilitator, project manager, and researcher with over 10 years' experience in administering and conducting qualitative and quantitative research in North America, in Europe, and in Africa. He has done extensive research on issues faced by underrepresented groups in the workplace. He has presented his findings at international conferences on the issues affecting ethnic and visible minority-based businesses. Prince has earned a PhD in business management and an MBA in international business.
There's a lot of awkward conversations around certain topics, and it's increasingly happening in businesses, whether small or big. And a lot of people find it difficult to interact or confront or have these discussions, which are really very, very important. They rather avoid it than talk about it. So as we talk today, I just want you to approach this conversation with an open mind, a mind that is ready to learn, a mind that is ready to explore maybe an uncharted territory for you. So today's session, why are we doing what we are doing today? Why is what we say and how we say it important? What makes some topics tricky and difficult? These are some of the things we're going to be looking at today. What makes some of these topics tricky and difficult? Why do we prefer to avoid instead of interacting or having these discussions that are so important? How should we approach conversations around difference? How should we approach it? What is what we say and how we say it? Why is what we say and how we say it very important? One, it fosters a relationship, and that relationship does trump stereotype. I remember talking with an HR manager, and she said to me, "Do you know why sometimes I find it so difficult to pronounce certain people's names at work? It is so difficult for me. I really find that it's such a trouble trying to learn the name. So what I do is sometimes, and I'm going to be honest with you, I put their CV aside. I'm going to be honest with you." And she said to me like, "Don't ever repeat this, you know." I'm going to be honest with you. I just put the CV aside because I don't want to deal with that during the interview. How many talents, how many skilled people have we lost through funny names? And what I also see among a lot of immigrants or minority, a lot of them go all the way to change their names because they are seeing that they are being screened out of interview just because their names are difficult. Should that be so? Should we be doing that? We did a quick Google search online, and we tried to do a search on how to avoid uncomfortable conversation. You know, and guess what? How many hits we got? We got about 34 million hits within 40 seconds. You don't want to be seen as labeled as homophobic, or labeled as a sexist, or labeled as you don't want to be labeled with anything. We would rather be in a place where we are seen to be correct. And more, we are seeing quite a few people finding it difficult to have conversations. There's this also desire to avoid conflict. We know the Canadian culture. Our culture, by nature, prefers to avoid conflict. We don't like when our voices go up in the workplace. In Africa, where I come from, Nigeria, it's so normal to see people raise their voice. And after a while, their voice goes down, and they've sorted out a problem or a difference that they had between them. But here, immediately you hear people raise their voice, everybody turns. it's not natural, you know. And people feel uncomfortable. Even people feel uncomfortable hearing people raising their voice, even though they are not the ones having those conversations. I remember sitting yesterday at a bus stop. I was waiting for my bus, and this girl walks in with her phone, and she was saying, "Mama," and she was talking about all the problems in her family, and I'm there. I was so uncomfortable. Because for me, the discussion had nothing to do with me, but she was saying something, you know, that I knew was not, I felt should be private, you know. Sometimes we're not sure about the issue. Maybe that's why we're not having the conversation. We're not sure of what the dilemma is, what the actual problem is. Or sometimes it could just be our indifference to the other person's reality, not understanding that the other person has a different reality from our reality. And Kay is going to be talking a lot about reality as time goes on. So do you get uncomfortable? And this is the question I want to ask everybody. Do we all get uncomfortable here? Do we? Yeah, I think we all do. Do we get uncomfortable when someone of a different ethnicity joins our team? Let's be honest with ourselves. When somebody from a different culture joins your team, how do you feel? Do you just nudge your team member and say, "Oh, we are in for it now. We have to start dealing with all this. Oh, I have to learn how to talk funny now, listen to a foreign accent or a different accent." I remember doing a training for one of the clients up west. And while I was doing this training, somebody mentioned something very, very interesting. They said to me, "Prince, you know, when we started this training, I found it a bit difficult to understand your accent." I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, what's happening now? He says, "But now I understand you clearly." And I just said to him, "You know what just happened to you? You just gained a skill. You gained a skill to understand Nigerians, you know." And we all laughed in the room. And that's what happens. If we have an open mind, we will gain a skill. We will learn how to have those conversations with people that are different from us. Some of us feel uncomfortable around certain topics, when certain topics come up in conversation. When providing a performance review to someone that is different, yep, you would rather provide that review to anybody, but not that person that is of a different culture or that has a disability or has any kind of difference in their life. And sometimes it could even just be when you have to conduct a disciplinary session with someone of a different culture. And more, this is happening. Given the demographic, the changing demographic of Canada, we will encounter this at some point as managers. We will have to do something like this. But that's not the problem. Encountering it is not the problem. The problem is how you handle those conversations.
I think at this point, it's really important to address this discomfort that we have, because it's not necessarily just discomfort in our mind, it's actually discomfort in our body. And oftentimes we react to uncomfortable situations through fight or flight. And that's just instinctual for all of us. So as Prince was alluding to, this idea of avoidance, and what we want to do is we want to encourage you to actually step literally inside of that fear and that fight or flight. So we're always going to encounter dilemmas one way or the other. And we all hold an element of difference. So that's the good news for all of us. We're all, no matter how much we think we look the same. So Prince was alluding to the fact, when someone of a different culture steps into that conversation, and all of a sudden, visibly, we have this visible representation of something's different here. But the reality is, we're all unique, brilliant human beings. So we're all going to have an element of difference. And the good news for you is that we're not alone. One of the things that I wanted to point out with respect to this reality, as it relates to our different, where we all are along that continuum of our comfort level, if you will. If we start to break it down, we have folks that have a lot of knowledge as it relates to how do we tackle those tricky conversations. So the next level is there's an understanding. So I have an understanding of why it's important and how I might want to engage. And then ultimately there's just this feeling of, we use the word respect, but there's just this feeling of comfort. So when that individual does step into, so we identify them as that individual that's visibly different. When they step into that conversation, we have our own personal comfort level around that. So there are assumptions that we make, and one of the things that we need to consider with this is we're not always meaning to be disrespectful or demeaning or diminishing someone's value, but sometimes the language that we use does have that kind of impact. So your English, your French is good. Did you go to school here? So again, if we start looking at those underlying presuppositions, what are the things I'm presupposing about that individual when I say something like that? Are you sure H needs an accommodation for Ramadan? H does not look or dress like a Muslim. So again, looking at these assumptions that we make, and we reveal that through our language. And it's important to note at this point, it's not about good, bad, right, or wrong. It really is about noticing my own self and the assumptions that I make and the presuppositions that I make. Can't you just use the gender neutral round? If I look at the bubble, your lifestyle is your business, we don't need to talk about it here. People want to personalize their workspace. We go to work and we kind of want to have some of the comforts of home, the pictures of, for me it was my 2 Dalmatians, because that's what it was. I loved my Dalmatians. They're no longer with me, but I loved my Dalmatians. But taking that a step further, I was with the police service for 20 years, and I'm gay. I've been with a partner for 25 years, but my partner held a lot of, in terms of the language that I use, was a lot of TH words. When I would talk about my weekend with my party, they did this, or and then there, right? So there was a lot of TH words. So how we adjust our own communication in terms of what's our own comfort level, and having other people around us be comfortable. So what we say is really critically important, and it really does represent how we hold the situation in our body. And again, very, very important to emphasize, it's not that it's good, bad, right, or wrong, it's just, it really is about how do I come back all the way to center, all the way to me, and really do explore, how do I hold this situation? How does it feel in my body? Because that's the start point for everything. So again, carrying on with what we say, I don't think of you as black. I don't see black when I relate with you. On the surface, it could be seen as maybe even far stretch a compliment, but the reality is, so what would be the other question we would ask her? If you didn't see me as, or think of me as black, what did you think of me as, right? So again, paying attention to our language and what really, because there's a lot of information in that statement. And it doesn't make the person wrong, and it doesn't make the person bad. It really does tell us where they are. If we look at it in terms of that knowledge, the understanding, and the respect, it really gives us a good sense of where people are. And the good news is you're all in the room, and you're all out there online, so we're all hearing this information. So when someone makes a statement that's similar to or exactly like that, we're in a much better, more informed position to go, oh, that's interesting, because they probably have some knowledge because they're trying really hard, and there might be some understanding there, but I'm not quite sure, so that we can actually be supportive of that individual, because that's really what it is all about. We really do want to help each other through tackling the tricky conversations. Again, oh, I'm so sorry, it must be difficult for you. This in relation to if there's a person with a disability, sort of sympathizing, when the reality is, in many cases, the majority of cases, we've adapted, and we're quite functional. But again, it speaks to how we hold the experience. It's really our experience of another person's reality. If the organization is willing to hire someone who looks like you, it's more caring than I thought, right? So again, that really doesn't require an explanation. So where are you from? No, really, where are you from? Yeah, right? So, yeah, so very, as intonation goes, right? And why don't you just get over it? So that statement is, it speaks to our reality and the degree to which we think people should have difficulty with something or not, or have a particular experience or not. We are all working from our individual structures of reality, our circle of all knowledge. And when we speak, that's revealed. I really like this slide, and I told Marutu I love this slide. This is really interesting. This is all about intent versus impact, right? So how we say it. All meaning, bar none, is context dependent. So in other words, I'm going to give you content, I'm going to share words with you, but how I say it really does give you a sense of how I hold the experience in my body. So how we say it, so the intent, and there's lots of things that go on in between. So I'm going to encode that message based on everything that I am and my history and all the stuff that I'm bringing into the room. And then ultimately, I send that message, and then that person that I'm sending, or people, such as yourselves that I'm sending that message to, you're all decoding it based on your experience. So I share a little story with you to emphasize the degree to which we are very, very predictable. We're very, very habituated. So I was doing a presentation with a police service out in Western Canada, and it was respectful workplace, no less. And we were at session 21 out of 26 sessions. We were doing 2 a day, 15 minutes for lunch in between, lots of stuff going on, you know, talking to people in between. So we'd finished a morning session, but that particular session, one of the attendees, participants had walked in late, and it was Bob. And Bob was walking in, and he was walking in with his seeing eye dog. So Bob sat at the front of the room with his seeing eye dog. I'm setting the stage for you just so you know, with his seeing eye dog. And so I'm carrying on. Hi, Bob. How are you? Welcome, right? And then I carry on in the presentation. You're going to get it right from the get-go, but I'll tell you how it all ended up. So I'm at some point in the presentation, and I pull up the slide, and like I did several, probably 100 times before, I pull up a slide that, from an effective presentation perspective, had way too many bullet points. So this is what I said: hold on to your chairs. So I said, yeah, truly. I said, here I go again, saying way too much on one slide. I know you all can read, right? So I'm just going to kind of paraphrase. So we carry on in the presentation, and the presentation's all done. We're in the back room. Judy and myself, my co-facilitator, we're munching on our sandwich, and Bob comes in, and after you do a presentation, you're feeling a little good, and had some interaction, and Bob comes up and says, hey, Bob, how are you doing? He says, well, actually, I'm not really doing that well. I said, and so you're thinking, what? Right? So then he goes on to tell me. He said, actually, I felt rather discriminated against. So there were a couple of options for me in that moment. As he told me the story, he says, remember that slide that you said everybody could read? Right? So in that moment, I had a couple of choices. I could have gone, well, Bob, really, you should have said something then. What's happening in that moment? I'm actually making it about Bob. Bob is Bob, really, right? But this is what happened. As structures of reality go, there was what I call a green dot moment, an opportunity for my world to expand. So I looked at Bob and I said, Bob, do you know how many times I have said that? I said, do you know, because you've come up to me and you've shared this with me directly, because really people want to know if the majority, and I will go out there, stick my neck out there and say 99.9% of the time people want to know if they've offended, because we're all working, speaking, talking from our structure of reality. So I said to him, thank you, because never again, right? So Bob was that gift to me. So we're going to talk about structure of reality. We're going to talk about intent versus impact. I'm going to give you some high-level information around that, because it is a critical piece in the grand scheme of everything that we're going to share with you today, and what we can offer you following today.
Why do I start sharing something with somebody and the person completely takes it to a different level from what I actually meant? Why do they misread my intent? Why does it have that effect on that person? Why did this, like I said it to somebody else before, but I said it to this person and suddenly it cuts deep. This person becomes emotional, becomes something else. And you're like asking yourself, what did I say wrong? And I have a model that is up there. We have action, which is action which usually happens in the public. It's like the comments you make, it's in the public because the other person gets to hear what you say. It's not something they assume you said, but you actually said something and they can hear those words. Then if you look, you will see the impact. Impact is talks about the effect or how the other person received what you said. And the impact could lead to a whole lot of things, or could be influenced by a whole lot of things. And one of those things is the backstory behind it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. When somebody says something to somebody, there is usually an intent before they say what they say. But often, the intent is also influenced by the person saying what their backstory is all about. And so when they say something and it goes out to the public, it becomes a comment, an action, a behavior. The person receiving that comment will react in a certain way. So the backstory is so crucial if we are going to have good conversation. Most of the time we don't take it seriously, or we don't ever really look at backstories. But backstories can determine quickly how people receive something. The backstory usually talks about some of the processes the person has passed through. I give you an instance, and I'm going to use this, my illustration. I was approaching there, I was going to, I was in Ottawa airport, you know, and you know, like sometimes they do these stop checks, you know, they call you out of the line and they say, hey, please step out of the line, please. Yep. Raise your hands, and they go. And immediately called me out of the line. Something happened inside of me. I just felt, what is all this about? Is it because I'm black? Now listen, you have to understand my backstory. Because when you're black, you find sometimes you pass through certain discriminations, maybe other races don't face, you know. And immediately this backstory wells up inside of me, and I started wondering, what's the intent of this search? So they call me out of the line. Now now I'm used to it. I'm so like used to it now. Now when they call me, I go like that. Okay. But then I was not used to it. So but because I knew a little bit around how backstories can influence and the intent, action, and impact, I engaged him in a conversation. I engaged him and her, because there were two of them. I engaged them in a conversation. And I said, can I ask you a question? Why did you choose me out of every other person that has just passed before? Why me? I had to engage them in that conversation. And immediately I asked him that question, and we're talking about a white, handsome man. He felt uncomfortable. I could see that something about him adjusted. He was like, I didn't do it. I could tell there was a battle going on. So he looked at the girl close, and she stepped forward. And she was the one that provided the explanation. She said, we do a routine check from time to time, and we do the swipe. You were just chosen at random. The next question is, what are you looking for, you know? And I said, I don't mean to be rude. I just want to understand a little better so that I can work with you. But you see, there was conversation going on. There was that openness. I was ready to learn. I was opening my world up to her, and I was giving her a chance to explain her intent. And also, by asking those questions, she could understand some of my backstory and my history. So we started having those discussions. And when we were done, she explained, she told me everything, then she sent me to the front of the line, which wasn't too bad. Suddenly I was in front of the line. Why am I giving this illustration? I'm giving this illustration because when we have conversations with people, especially people that are different, there is a lot of history behind. Sometimes you say something to any other person, they don't react. They say the same thing to an Aboriginal person, and you get a very negative reaction. Why? Because there is a history of discrimination, a history that they passed through, you know. Or you said something, and I remember, I'm going to also share this. I was facilitating with some law enforcement officers, and one of them said to me that we approached a group of young men, black boys, and they were all mad. We told them, they were like, no, they were so difficult to handle. What do you do? We tried to tell them that we're not discriminating against them, but they would not listen to us. I said, well, you have to be patient because they have a history that is drumming or triggering how they see you. And we have to be conscious as we have conversations. There are certain people that you're going to be having conversations with in your team or in your workplace that have a certain history. And you have to open and clarify your intent ahead of time before you have those conversations. So I am going to be talking about change in a 3-step process. Kay and I will be talking about change in a 3-step process. And we will look at before the conversations, what you can do to prepare yourself to have some of these conversations. Then we're going to look at during the conversations. Are there things you should consider when you're having those conversations? Then we'll look at after the conversation. Are there build-ups or things you should keep doing to keep that relationship open?
So one of the things we're going to encourage is that you actually interrogate your own reality. because everywhere we go, there we are. So we're bringing our belief systems, what I like to call our BVAs, beliefs, values, and attitudes. We're bringing that into the conversation, even when we're trying to be aware of and be cognizant of the language that we're using. We're still bringing in our reality. And I'm going to take that a step further and suggest that what is your reality, not about everyone else first, but your reality about you. What are the conversations you're having with yourself, about yourself, as it relates to the situation you're in and the people you're in that situation with? So it's a really good idea before the conversation is just kind of check in with yourself. What's the chatterbox doing? What are those conversations? What do they sound like? Are they exuding confidence? Are they allowing you to step into that conversation with confidence, with competence, with a certain comfort level? And if they're not, check in with what is that conversation and why am I having it? What has been my experience? And how do I move into that conversation resourcefully in spite of that? And there's lots of ways that we can do that, but for the sake of today's presentation, we want you to be aware that that's something that's really critical in terms of that before the conversation and being able to be resourceful in that. So with respect to what is our reality, so, here we have yours and your society's norms and values. We have the organizational culture and that concept, that idea of reducing the uncertainty. So when we talk about yours and society's norms and values, if I were to actually break that down, I would suggest that it starts with your individual belief systems. So, who and how you hold yourself, where those belief systems came from. And I'm telling you, for the first 10 years of my adult life, I was sure the only bank that existed was the Bank of Nova Scotia. My mother banked at the Royal Bank. My father banked at the Bank of Nova Scotia. And a very patriarchal society being brought up in that, although I was female, just like my mom, I went to the Bank of Nova Scotia thinking that there weren't any other banks out there. Right? So what was your upbringing? What are your individual beliefs, values, and attitudes? And that's a fairly benign belief, but when we start getting into that interpersonal piece, there's going to be impact. Society's norms and values in terms of the conversation today, we're looking at that from the perspective of what's the organizational vision, mission, values? What do they espouse to? And we all know what they are. So, we walk into office buildings and we see the vision, mission, values statements on the wall. And then we look at the organization's culture. In some circles, they'll call this the subculture of the organization. I really like Prince's terms. He calls it the quiet culture. So what are the ways that we move through our workplace in order not to make waves, to be accepted, never wanting to be the last one picked for the team, right? That follows us through our entire life, never wanting to be the last one picked for the team. And in terms of that reality, how is it playing into your experience in the workplace? So if we look at that from the perspective of cycle of confirmation, I can have a conversation with Nurin, is it? I can have a conversation with Nurin, and Nurin and I, oh man, we got something jiving here. Like we've got a rapport, we understand each other, it feels really good, and everything I'm saying, Nurin's confirming for me, and I'm confirming for her, and it's good, right? And then we get into that one where all of a sudden something gets called into question. So I'm having a conversation with Jessica, and Jessica calls something into question around myself. And what happens in terms of my structure of reality and the things that I know, the things I don't know, and the big piece of the pie that I like to say, the things I don't know. The moment Jessica questions something, this is a great conversation over here, but this is where expansion begins. So thank you, Nurin, and we'll continue to have those conversations, and I would invite you to question something of me if that's what's happening for you. But over here, this is where our world expands. This is where we start to move from that knowledge to understanding to that effortless effort around respect. So when you're having those conversations, somebody's confirming something, what does your body feel like? When you're having those conversations, something gets questioned. What does your body feel like? I encourage you to stay right there. Stay in that conversation and get really curious. How does my world expand now? Because here's the news flash. Our biological imperative is growth. We're actually meant to grow and evolve. Discovered in the Petri dish by Dr. Bruce Lipton. Right? So our biological imperative is growth. So I'm going to expand with Nurin, there's no doubt, but for sure when that happens with Jessica, it's off the charts expansion.
We are going to watch a video, but before I play the video, I just want to tell you a little bit about this video. It's one of the TED productions, and it's by Derek Silver. This video allows you to quickly see how your reality could be awkward somewhere else. How what you call normal might be somebody's awkward somewhere else in the world. It goes to begin to somewhat strengthen what Kay has been talking about, how our realities can be different, and how what we consider normal is abnormal to somebody else. It challenges you to ask yourself a question. Is your normal actually the only normal? Or is there a possibility that out there are other normals? Now, when you begin to think like that or begin to understand this, suddenly you become more open-minded around people that are different, around conversations that do not kind of match up with your reality. I'll ask you to just watch this video and take something home with you.
So imagine you're standing on a street anywhere in America, and a Japanese man comes up to you and says, excuse me, what is the name of this block? And you say, I'm sorry, well, this is Oak Street, that's Elm Street. This is 26th, that's 27th. He says, okay, but what is the name of that block? And you say, well, blocks don't have names. Streets have names. Blocks are just the unnamed spaces in between streets. He leaves a little confused and disappointed. So now imagine you're standing on a street anywhere in Japan. You turn to a person next to you and say, excuse me, what is the name of this street? And they say, oh, well, that's block 17 and this is block 16. And you say, okay, but what is the name of this street? And they say, well, streets don't have names. Blocks have names. Just look at Google Maps here. There's block 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All of these blocks have names, and the streets are just the unnamed spaces in between the blocks. And you say, okay, then how do you know your home address? I said, well, easy. This is District 8. There's block 17, house number 1. You say, okay, but walking around the neighborhood, I noticed that the house numbers don't go in order. He said, of course they do. They go in the order in which they were built. The first house ever built on a block is house number 1. The second house ever built is house number 2. Third is house number 3. It's easy. It's obvious. So I love that sometimes we need to go to the opposite side of the world to realize assumptions we didn't even know we had and realize that the opposite of them may also be true. So for example, there are doctors in China who believe that it's their job to keep you healthy. So any month you are healthy, you pay them. And when you're sick, you don't have to pay them because they failed at their job. They get rich when you're healthy, not sick. In most music, we think of the 1 as the downbeat, the beginning of the musical phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in West African music, the 1 is thought of as the end of the phrase, like the period at the end of a sentence. So you can hear it not just in the phrasing, but the way they count off their music. 2, 3, 4, 1. And this map is also accurate. There's a saying that whatever true thing you can say about India, the opposite is also true. So let's never forget, whether at TED or anywhere else, that whatever brilliant ideas you have or hear, that the opposite may also be true. Domo arigatou gozaimashita.
I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a poll question. I'm going to ask you, and take a minute, 30 seconds a minute, consider this. What do you think is the percentage of words in the English language that has more than one meaning? So can you imagine now, when we look at that communication model and we know it's about the sender and the, encoding the message and receiving and then how that person is receiving, and in combination with 80%. So the words that I'm stating to you and that Prince has been sharing with you, the ones that are going on for you when you share with us, 7% is lending to our understanding. That's very small. Tone of voice, how we say the words, 38%. 38%. 38%. See? Body language, 55%. 55%, imagine. So I do the math backwards, because I'm going to go with the small number, so 100 minus 7. 93% of the way we communicate has nothing to do with the words that we're using, the content, if you will. So we have a good mind to pay attention to what is the information we're actually sharing. You know, if I'm speaking with someone and I want to engage you and I want to assure you that, you know, we're going to take care of you, when in the back of my mind I'm going, you know, problem, right? And I go, really, and your name is? Really, Judy? I want you to know that we are here to help you. Little problematic, right? Listen, here's our reality for each and every one of us. Our bodies do not have the ability to lie. Our intellect can use words to try and convince somebody of something, but our bodies do not have the ability to lie. And in order to lie with our bodies so that there's congruency between the language and the body, you have to have all kinds of training to do that. The body ultimately will give itself away. And here's the other piece to that. We're very intuitive. So we know. I mean, I was very deliberate, but we actually know. Right? So it's very important when we look at that as one of the considerations we're making when we're in that conversation, that tricky conversation. And so I go back to that before the conversation, and the idea of checking in with yourself. What's actually going on with yourself, with and for yourself? So nonverbal communication cannot be fake. Stated differently, the body does not have the ability to lie. That's 93% worth of inability to lie. That's a lot, right? So that's good information. That's great for us to know. So how we differ? Communication. You know, there's direct communication and indirect communication, face-to-face communication, and we have all kinds of stuff around social media now, Facebook, different ways that we communicate. It can get kind of crazy making. Physical distance. As a police officer for 20 years, when somebody got a little close to me, I started getting a little bit, okay, just, you know, like that bladed stance and kind of get myself in a position. Why are they moving in, right? So all meaning is context dependent. What's your context? Eye contact, verbal, nonverbal, conversation flow, level of formality, right? So all of these things will factor into during the conversation, things that we want to be the things that we want to consider in that communication. Please. Thank you.
So just kind of taking you back when I was talking about intent, action, intent, and impact. I just wanted to kind of juggle our mind and like get us to a place where we can begin to ask ourselves, okay, we have this challenge in terms of making, we are trying to have this conversation with people and they misread our intent. What can we do to arrive at a point where we all have a shared meaning, where we understand each other, where we really are on the same page? And I'm going to just kind of share a few things. They are very basic things. In a proper training, we will delve way deeper, and we will get people to do role play and do several other things to get people very comfortable with this. But I just wanted to quickly point out number one: appropriate time, place, and behavior. It's amazing how you can have a wonderful conversation just by knowing the right time, the right place, and having the right behavior about you. Now, if I'm not happy with somebody, or I perceive somebody has hurt me, or somebody is looking to be a little bit curious or ask questions about me, or some things that I feel could be a little bit sensitive, if the person doesn't choose the right time, they might not get the right response from me. You know, it could appear like they are trying to hurt me, or they are trying to do something to demean or put my character less than it should be. So, what can we do? What can we really do to show in thinking about appropriate time, place, and behavior? One is we can make the environment safe. It's just so amazing whenever I'm doing training, how suddenly I see managers begin to share things they will never share with their HR. Why is that? Because we tend to create an atmosphere where people feel safe. They feel they can really, really bear out their mind and be open and have an honest conversation. And when we when we are having conversations with people, you have to create that atmosphere around them. Make them feel they can really talk to you. And know how to begin some of these conversations. Just a simple thing, why don't we get together and have coffee or talk? You know, it doesn't have to always be like you're standing in the hallway and you're beginning to have this. Create a relaxed atmosphere where you can talk with the person freely. Try to use non-threatening questions, you know. And an example of a non-threatening question will be, what was your intent when you said this? You know, what was your intent? You're checking in on that person's intent. You know, what effect did my action have on you? How did you experience the action? What type of response, effect were you hoping to get from me? By asking those honest questions, we open up our world and we let that person come in to have those conversations. And one thing I found is so important to have a right attitude. Sometimes I refuse to have conversations with people, especially if I know it's very sensitive, till I have checked myself. There's this oracle in Delphi that says, know thyself. The greatest thing you could ever do for yourself is to know yourself. Nobody can know you better than you know yourself, you know. And when you know yourself, you know that there are certain times you will not be able to converse or have a conversation rationally. Maybe you need to step away at that time, you know, from your team members or from your team that you're leading, and kind of gather your thoughts, reframe your mind, check your biases before going out there to have a conversation. Now, also, it's important to explore each other's stories. Acknowledge different experiences. Don't just go there, don't go into having a conversation and expecting the other person's story to match up with your story. Be open to explore their story, explore their backstory, why they behave the way they behave, why they do what they do. You all know that we all get socialized differently. There's so much that plays into our socialization. Our education, differences in education, our religious beliefs, just what we see in the media. All these factors make us individually unique. I always say, in the midst of a multitude of people, we are all uniquely unique. Everybody, there can be no two of you. Somebody could look like you to completion, but by the time you interact with those two people, even twins, you find that they're completely different. They have their individual experiences and reality. So acknowledge different experiences, suspend judgment, try not to judge. Hold it, try it, you know. Try it, hold it, you know, try not to judge. Be open to listen to the other person. Empathize and listen to understand. Often we do listen. I'm listening to you, yes, I'm listening to you. I'm hearing you, but are you really listening to understand? Or are you listening through a lens of bias, through a lens of intolerance, through a lens of unacceptance? You have already made up your mind about this discussion. No matter what they tell you, you're not going to bend, you know. They hurt you, so that's it. He didn't do his job properly, that is it. I don't want to know the reasons behind it. He is a poor performer. Why don't you just empathize and listen to understand by asking the right questions? Identify any biases attached to this dilemma and manage your emotions. You know, emotions, if they are not well managed, anger could suddenly become rage, you know. Anger could become something blown out. We've been invited as an organization to facilitate certain organizations where the environment has become so toxic. Managers could not work together with their teams. It was so difficult. And we were like, they wanted us to come in and facilitate and kind of begin to look at some of the issues and the challenges. It's so important as managers, as leaders, to manage our emotions. Then I want to talk about reframing. So for us to reframe, we have to begin by appreciating and respecting differences. Are you somebody that respects people that are different from you? Or do you see them as strange? Or do you see them as people that, oh, I'd rather not have this? Given we could feel a bit uncomfortable, but that discomfort is a challenge for us, like I said, to open up our world. And like Kay said, to begin to explore their reality and understand that through exploring this reality, we could leverage some of the differences we have, and that could become an organizational strength, not a disadvantage. And more, a lot of organizations are beginning to understand that difference is not a bad thing. Difference could mean differences in opinion. It could mean differences in ways to innovate, differences in ways to push the organization forward. And they're beginning to open this world of difference and inviting people to come in and exploring how they can use it as a strength. Let's identify positive outcomes, identify ways to resolve dilemma, and translate what the other says into concepts that are more helpful. It's not enough to have these discussions, but after these discussions, what do you do with them? Do you just let it lie on the table as one of those beautiful, fantastic things you think of? Or do you go back and say to yourself, I had this conversation with somebody that had a disability. What can I do now in my organization to make sure that the place is accessible? What are the practical things I could put in place to help people like that feel more comfortable, or feel a sense of value, recognition, and respect? This is what this conversation should be all about. And I'm going to ask a question. For those of you online, I just want to quickly say to you that if you look by the side of your screen, you have a place where you could tick off the answer. The question I want to ask, and I'm going to ask everybody here, is, where do you think people are more likely or more likely to be open around sharing their views freely? Do you think it will be online, as people on the social media, or it's going to be face-to-face in a personal setting? Where do you think people are more likely to share their views freely?
Social media.
How many of you say social media? Okay, quite a lot of people in the room. What about, how many of you say online? How many of you say personal setting, like face-to-face? Yep, okay, good. Actually, the answer is nowhere. If they feel they will not be, what they are sharing with you is not going to be valued in any way, they will not share it. How many of, I'm just going back because I do Facebook at times, I'm not, but I tend to keep up with what goes online. Haven't you seen that often when we share things online, we want to share the best things about us. We want to share our finest pictures. We never really put up those drab pictures that we don't look nice in. It's always the best side of us. It's kind of an online branding. So we can be like that around conversation. If we have a sense that people will not agree with what we are saying, we tend to be a bit uncomfortable and we don't want to share it. That avoidance comes in. So I just like this wonderful quote. It says, feeling comfortable with differences in people comes only through understanding them. How true it is. You really want to know somebody, you want to feel comfortable around them, you just got to understand and get to know them. You got to invest some time to know them, have those conversations. I like people that walk up to me, and say hello, and then we start talking. And I've learned that sometimes when they ask questions, even if it's not properly asked, sometimes I've come to see that some of the intentions are good, and I try to adjust and open up my world so that I can learn about them. So let's reveal, let's listen, and not just listen, let's listen to understand.
So it's really critically important to keep that momentum going with respect to all of the things that you've done to prepare for that conversation, the energy and the effort that you put in to ensure that conversation has been resourceful, and then how do we keep that momentum going and flowing? So a couple of key points. Continue the dialogue. Check in when you need to check in. If things feel like they might be going off the rails, check back in with them. And again, going back to that internal resourcefulness. Identify and share what success looks like with others. Actually have that conversation. If we were successful, if we were going to have the best outcome, the kind of outcome we're looking for, what would that look like? And actually draw that picture. Talk about how to enrich or keep future relationships open. Discourage behaviors that attack the self-respect of others. Here's the reality for each and every one of us. None of us walks through the workplace door, no matter what that workplace is for you. None of us walks through the workplace door with a desire to be disrespected. We all want that respect, right? So how do we ensure that that is a mainstay? Confront people who stereotype or who are seen to be stereotyping others or display prejudiced behavior. Here's the reality for all of us. If we have a pulse, we will carry biases. I use Sensodyne toothpaste. My partner uses Crest. I like Sensodyne. I don't like Crest, right? That's a fairly benign bias. I'm partial to Sensodyne. When we start getting into those more impactful experiences, interpersonal experiences, here's the reality. We're all going to have belief systems, right? And we bring them with us everywhere we go. Really important here, when that's happening, is being able to engage in that conversation where, confronting people with stereotypes, being able to engage in that conversation with respect and with an understanding that, they've got a structure of reality. We all do. So this is coming from their structure of reality. So acknowledging that. Take the time to get to know the people around you. both in your professional and personal life, because they do interact with each other, undoubtedly.
It's a powerful, very powerful quote by Marie Curie. She says, nothing in life is to be feared, and how true. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. I must say, fear could just prevent us from walking boldly into new grounds, from exploring something that could really open up a world of opportunity for us. Fear prevents teams from innovating. Sometimes they want to stick to what they're used to, so they don't want any conversations that will bring in new ideas. Fear prevents us from changing and tapping into new ideas instead of avoiding conversations and opinions that are different from what we're used to. I just believe it's an opportunity for us, again, like I said, to open up our world and engage in those conversations. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It could be done positively. It could be done in a safe environment that allows everybody to learn and become stronger through it. And that's just what I have to say about it.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I would say to that is the moment we drop the fear, that difficult conversation also goes to the side, and the conversation is no longer difficult. Fear is a state, right? So if I'm engaging with Nurin in a state of fear, then I'm not going to have that inner resourcefulness. The moment I drop the fear and I introduce a willingness for my structure of reality to expand. So I may not say the right thing, I may not say it at the right time, but I know that the feedback from Nurin, I'm open and receptive to that, and my structure of reality expands. There's two things that go on. One, I grow, and the other one, I'm living in congruency with my biological imperative, which is growth. Everything else is agitating because it's not about growth, right? It's about staying in that state of protection. Fear, being in fear, is a state to be in a state of protection, and our biological imperative is actually to be in a state of growth. So the moment we drop the fear, and I open up myself, and I become receptive to everything else that's coming in from my external world, that difficult conversation no longer exists. And the other thing, very important, when your mind has been changed, are you willing to change your mind? In order to be in that structure of reality, that big piece of the pie that's about expansion, when your mind has been changed, are you willing to change your mind, or do you go, nope, this is what I said, and I'm sticking to it, right? So fearless allows you to go, wow, never quite considered it that way, right? And our world expands.
I want to just say that as an organization, Graybridge, we do provide quite a lot of resources that can support managers and employees to begin to feel comfortable around having those conversations within the workplace. And whether you like it or not, we've changed a whole lot. Canada is changing, the workplace is changing. You know, you are meeting people with, that come from different backgrounds and have different experiences. And as managers, you want to be comfortable having conversations that are very sensitive or difficult when they come up. You don't want to be seen as a manager always running away from those conversations, or as a leader always running away from those conversations. So a few models that could help is we have a structural frame, the structural frame of reality model by Kay, you know, and there is a framework for inclusive diversity conversation by Dr. Judy Laws, and we have a difficult conversation process adapted from Douglas Stone. And working with these models with managers, we found it so useful and powerful in helping channel their discussion and helping them to get benefit in terms of their relationship with their teams and their organization.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Actually, we've gone a bit over time, but that's great. That shows that you have interest, and it's an important topic. I'd just like to say a few quick words about Graybridge Malkam. For those of you who may not know our organization, we were founded in 1988. Our mission is to help your personnel and organizations develop competencies that enhance the human potential, as we were discussing. Our core business areas include diversity and inclusion, intercultural, and language training. We provide courses, workshops, custom course design, as we were just talking about, consulting, and research services. I think you might be able to see on screen. If we don't have it up there, that's okay. A sampling of our clients. Obviously, we help private and public sector in Canada and abroad. I invite you to visit our website to learn more about our organization and the services we offer. www.graybridgemalkam.com. Some of you may have more questions on this topic, and I encourage you to continue the conversation. You can send us, you can tweet us your questions. You can send them to @GMDiversity. You can also use older technology and send an email. I would address it to Marutu Mogafrisa. As I said earlier, Marutu is also a Senior Diversity and Inclusion Specialist at Graybridge. And if you really want to go old school, you can actually pick up the phone and give her a call or someone else in our diversity team. Finally, I'd like to thank Kay Roberts and Prince Ehoro for their fascinating and informative presentation today. And on behalf of all our team at Graybridge Malkam, I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules today to come and help us make this presentation a success. Have a great afternoon, and merci beaucoup. Au revoir.